Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I do really want to start us off before anything. If you could introduce yourself.
My name is Mike Eng. I'm a former assembly member and former mayor, and I really want to thank CAUSE, especially Charlie Wu and Nancy Yap and all the staff. I know Farrah's involved in this one for once again raising one of the most important AAPI empowerment issues of our time, which is representation on the LA County Board of Supervisors. Whether it's redistricting or voter education, CAUSE has been at the forefront in making sure that democracy works for our local and regional communities. I'm so excited to be here at this historical moment.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being willing to talk to us about all of these issues. I know that you have been such an advocate for our communities, but also know our communities really well. And I'd love to hear from your opinion. What is the importance of this measure, Measure G?
Well, very briefly, Measure G will, as we all know, expand the board of supervisors, create an independent mayor, create an ethics commission, and limit the county to spend no more than $43 billion on its new districts. And it will start in 2032 based on the 2030 census. This measure, when polled, had the largest, highest rate of support among Asian Americans, which is 74%. Why is that? First, Asian Americans, like everyone else, want governing bodies that look like we do, whether it's the Congress or the legislature or local city councils. Latinos and African Americans and ourselves have always voted for the best representation. And we feel that it must reflect not necessarily everyone, but it must reflect us. There has never been an Asian American on the Board of Supervisors, one of the largest governing bodies in the United States, if not the world, which represents 10 million people. Just for comparison, the US Congress, each representative has slightly less than 1 million people. State senator in California, slightly less than 1 million people. And when I served in the state assembly, it was roughly about 500,000 people. Each supervisor represents 2 million people. Asian Americans also are concerned about housing, homelessness, public safety, healthcare crisis like COVID, which produced Asian hate. And this county, which has a budget of $43 billion, is already difficult to access, whether it's language access among people that want to contact the county, or whether it's business people who want to convince them that we need more Asian businesses serving the county. We don't have any one person to hold accountable. And although I would say the County Board of Supervisors, as I know them, do a great job, and many of them I work with, not having an Asian American, having other people represent us is a huge difference. One supervisor to represent 2 million people makes it difficult when you have communities like the AAPI that represents many, many different languages and a huge diversity of needs. And so I think it's something that is very, I would say, elementary, which is that Asian Americans want a seat at the table. We have families that escape governments that were sometimes accused of corruption and mismanagement. Coming to America, our families expect more, our immigrant communities expect more, and that's why having an ethics commission for the first time to make it easier to discipline elected officials charged with corruptions is something that is very, very appealing. Asian Americans also are appreciative of the non-Asian Americans that represent us. But let me tell you, it's not the same. When my wife, Judy Chu, and I started to run for office almost 30 years ago, we were told, wait, it's not your time. Even though Asian Americans are not on the governing bodies, whether it's the school board, city council, assembly, et cetera, it's not your time. You should wait. Wait when you have the experience to access those public offices. We were told that others could hire Asian staff and represent our interests. It's funny, we sat down with an elected official and a state assembly member, had dinner with them at our house, and we said, we just want one thing. Our district is, our city's becoming majority Asian. Would you consider hiring just one Asian American? After having dinner, he looked back and he said, I don't think so. I really don't think this is the time or place for that. And that's really offensive. And that's why we decided it's time for us to run for office. And Judy Chu became the first Chinese American woman elected in Congress. I think I was the first Chinese American male to represent the 49th district. And we found that hopefully we've made a difference to partner a community that represents our backgrounds and whom we can now represent their backgrounds, their needs and their wants and their hopes and their dreams as well. I think this is a historic moment. There's been talk about changing the LA City Council lines through action, perhaps a lawsuit by the Attorney General's office. I think that's a rumor that I saw in the LA Times. People are talking about expanding the United States Supreme Court, which, by the way, has never had a single Asian American. And I think this is one of those wake-up calls that people are finally thinking about what representation means and what a democracy really requires as far as that representation.
All right. Thank you. I mean, I think all of the things you mentioned in terms of the importance of representation, but also your very hands-on experience of what it means, not only to advocate for it, but also be willing to step up and be a first. But what I also am curious is if a lot of our communities understand the importance of that representation. Can you give an example about what representation could mean in the county from like a day-to-day person, let's say in the San Gabriel Valley?
I'll give you an example that's been brought to my attention several times. Um, I've had businesses that have represent Asian products or Asian Americans that represent products that would be helpful to the county. And they've told me that when they try to negotiate that difficult process, they don't particularly find a friendly or welcoming environment. And they sure wish they had someone that was on the board of supervisors that they could explain how important businesses, Asian businesses, are to our local economy, so how hard they work, how they were decimated by COVID. I'm not saying that the supervisors don't understand that, but I think when you have a large agency that you have to go through many hurdles, I think it would help to have someone pick up the phone and say, "Hey, listen, there's some folks that are hurting, that have a product, that need a voice, and would you consider them?" And I think having a supervisor make that request, it's not a request for special attention, it's a request for what everybody else already has. And that's all we want. I think the second thing is that I think it would really improve local city councils. As you know, many of the LA County needs, whether it's the sheriff's department, whether it's libraries, which are very important, of course, especially to Asian Americans, whether it's transportation, the sheriff's department, public parks, open space. These are issues that require our supervisors to know the impact of those Asian American communities. I'm not saying they don't see the impact in these reports they receive, but it would really help to have delegations of Asian Americans go and knock on the door of another Asian American and say, I know you don't have to understand this because you already have this in your DNA, but this is what we need. I think that really makes a difference. Now, if anyone that thinks we're being too aggressive or out of place, let me ask you, if there had not been a single African American or a single Latino or a single woman on the board of supervisors, as there once was before, they would be picketing, filing lawsuits, writing op-ed pieces, and their voices would be heard because that clearly is an injustice. But when Asian Americans start saying, hey, we want something that everybody else wants, then it becomes a budget problem, or suddenly it becomes a logistical problem, or we need to study it more. I think we're tired of being studied. We want to be the people that control the budget, that studies everything. And then I think we have tremendous elected officials that could step up. I'm not never going to run for that position, but we have tremendous people that would, I think, really, really make a difference. And so I think we're at the moment before Mike Wu ran, became the first Asian American in the LA City Council. We're way, way back decades ago to that moment. And yet this is the Board of Supervisors. And so I think it just makes sense that we want a governing body that reflects what the electorate looks like, sounds like, feels like, and dreams about every night of becoming a better, more perfected democracy with better representation. Be given a chance like everybody else is.
No, thank you for just framing it that way, but also I think what communities can do together, and how people can have that choice. So much of what you talked about a little bit earlier was the number of people that each supervisor represents is 2 million. And I think just all the different layers of other government officials who represent smaller groups of folks. And I think just for me, as someone who has served, what could a difference from like making that size smaller, how could it actually impact the way that we engage with our county supervisors?
Number one, having been a local elected official of a local city, I want to say cities do a lot with the supervisors. And I think more and more in the San Gabriel Valley becoming elected, Asian American elected officials, I think having that voice, collectivizing their voice with a supervisor that understands those needs is very important. Number two, there are literally dozens, perhaps hundreds of commissions that are not filled, and yet they have impact our daily lives. Wouldn't it be great to put out a call to the entire Asian American community, not just in one district, but in the entire LA County, and say, these are positions that we want filled, and have them in the languages, not just putting it on a website, but maybe doing an aggressive campaign to fill those seats. Those are very, very important seats, commissions that control our libraries, that control our, or not necessarily control, but have a say over our libraries, allocation for parks, et cetera, et cetera. And the list goes on and on and on. That's just basic fundamental democracy. And I think it's too much to ask. Every time I see a supervisor or an event, I think they must, they represent, some of them, 20 cities. And I think, boy, just to get them here to this one moment must be an incredible logistic feat. And yet when they say that's why the representative will tell me this supervisor can only be here for maybe 20 or 30 minutes. And I understand that. And I think of the staff that has to put up with such a huge jurisdiction. I think of the supervisor that has to put up with all of this. It just makes, it's inhumane to expect one person to represent 2 million people. And I think that's why it would really make a difference. I think it makes a difference if you want to serve on a commission, if you want to provide services, contracts, if you want to have a supervisor come and visit your local city council and give a rundown, do a partnership with them, projects where the supervisor is really partnering, real democracy, partnering, coalescing with, providing services, providing a budget that includes Asian American needs, not just during COVID, not just during the fact that we had a shooting in Monterey Park. Those are great moments, and the Board of Supervisors really stepped up. But there are moments in between where we have people crying out that have those needs. Healthcare is a strong example. A lot of people didn't know this. We did a study when I was in the legislature. At that time, cancer was the leading cause of death among Asian Americans, among groups of any ethnicity. It was number one in the Asian American community. So how about looking at those health disparities? How about having a week in the Board of Supervisors where we say this week is devoted to addressing cancer in the Asian American community, and on so on and so forth. Mental health at one time, compulsive gambling at one time was the largest need, mental health need of any community, but it was the number one mental health need in the Asian American community because of the need to gamble and feel normal and want to make money. These are things that are very, very little known. And I think that having an Asian American supervisor who knows that community would really, really make it known. We have issues like latchkey children. The parents are off working or have left the country, and they're flooding local libraries. They did back when I was on the library board. Um, these issues need services. I'm not saying they're not being met, but I'm just saying that I'd like to see a focus, a spotlight, if you will. I would like to see some real attention. I would like to know what the budget is that is being spent on Asian Americans right now. Does anyone know? I don't think so, because we're not disaggregating that data. And I know an Asian American supervisor who is held accountable to the Asian American community would want to disaggregate their budget and say the following services that directly meet, whether it's translators, whether it's physicians, support staff, mental health, uh, physical health, that can address those local communities. We're providing people that speak those languages, that have the cultural sensitivity. What is the budget? Where can anyone tell me how much is being spent countywide? I don't know. Maybe I should have asked earlier, and maybe it is available if you dig it. But I think that we don't have to dig for those factors if we have an Asian American who's responsive, who knows that their votes are coming from the Asian American community, to know that they're accountable to the Asian American community. Those are factoids that would come off on the tip of their tongue, because that's what it means to be accountable to the Asian American community. Mentors. Our community has elected officials that are running for the very first time. It is not in the DNA of Asian American immigrants to run for office. When we're growing up, we're told never speak out in public, don't ask for money, don't borrow money, don't get in the headlines, and don't do anything that would make your parents embarrassed that you're in the headlines. Well, that's exactly what people do when they run for office. And I want to tell you, we need more mentors. There are more and more Asian American, Pacific Islander that are running for office for the first time. And we need mentors like a county-wide mentor. We don't have enough of those right now that have the experience at that level. And I think that's why it's really, really important that we develop those resources right now. I could go on, but that's what it would mean to me to know that I could pick up the phone and say, did you know that we have a problem in this community, in the Cambodian community? When we went to the Cambodian community to do citizenship outreach, we were met with this universal question: if we become US citizens, aren't we subject to more laws that we're not subject to right now, that we're not citizens? Well, there are stereotypes about our government that exist in every community. We need to have a roadshow of elected officials in the LA County that go out to these various communities and say, this is what our government can do for you. What are your questions? Why aren't we working better together? Is it language? Is it culture? Is it resources? Is it the lack of staff? Let me tell you, I've been to many meetings where the supervisor has not attended, and the staff hands out a certificate, and that's great. And they'll give a speech far shorter than mine would be. But I want to tell you, it's really different when you have a supervisor that's out there eyeballing, stays behind for a few minutes because they don't have to rush off to 20 more events, and says, I want to meet some of you. I want to know your stories. Now, again, this is not a criticism of supervisors. Supervisors are initiating Measure G. So if this is a criticism of them, then shame on them for giving me the opportunity to speak about representation, because they're offering it. And God bless them and thank them for doing this. But we're not going to waste this moment to say, yes, thank you, goodbye. We missed the moment. We're going to use this opportunity to persuade other people, because not just Asian Americans are going to vote for this. It's got to be other people who, and those, that's really the issue. What are the issues in those other communities that don't apply, that are not persuasive, that we're going to get more Latino and Asian representation? It's got to be ethics, got to be, has to be many, many other things. And I think that's why we have to get busy and roll up our sleeves and form the coalitions that address not just the ABAC community, the Latino community, the Anglo community, the African American community, and on and on and on, because this is the tidal wave of empowerment that's going to raise all boats. And let me tell you, when Asian Americans are empowered, when they do better, we all do better. When their businesses do better, we can enhance the economy. We all do better. When we get more library services because our kids want places to study, we're all going to have enhanced test scores. So we're all going to do better. It's not just Asian Americans that are going to benefit. We're all going to benefit. And so that's why I feel so strongly that this is not an Asian American measure. G is not just for Asian Americans. It's for everybody in LA County. And we're just dying to see it implemented. It's kind of like that young person that says, "Give me a chance." You've overlooked me all these years in favor of somebody else, which was my background, and all I wanted was a chance. And I think that's all we want, is a chance to serve, not by ourselves, but with this amazing coalition, this amazing body called LA County. Nothing like it in the world.
No, I think, just the diversity here in this county continues to be something that's not just, can have challenges with inclusion, but also so inspiring to see the ways we come up with solutions. And I think in your conversations about Measure G with other people, is there any common misunderstanding that you're hearing or common criticism of it? And what would your response be to it if you are hearing a criticism?
Well, one of the common responses is that it's too expensive, that we don't know where the money's come from. But within the resolution that was passed, it said that the budget that we're allocating cannot increase for this. And in fact, if you have smaller districts, instead of 2 million, and you have 1 million, then you only need half as many staff. And so therefore, I think it's going to end up paying for itself. But I think this is the question. We're investing in better democracy, and there's no better investment than to invest in something that is the cornerstone of what we have in America. Another criticism or another question about it is, well, if we have this, how does it benefit? Is it only going to benefit Asian Americans? Is it an Asian American gimmick, so to speak? And I think I answered that. No, everybody's going to stand up there. And if you think that you're going to get elected just because you're a particular ethnic group or gender or whatever, I've campaigned now for I've been in 9 elections. I can tell you that is only going to last you 20 seconds. You have to demonstrate more than that. So I think the answer is, we want to give people a chance, and there's no guarantee it's going to be an Asian American or Latino or an African American, but that's why we have a democracy. We're not going to force the election, but we do want that chance.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for answering all of our questions.